We come now to Akhenaten and the Amarna Revolution. This is a fascinating period in Egyptian. Here we have a fowling scene. This is a wall painting from the tomb of Nebamun from the 18th dynasty, dating from around 1400 to 1350 BC. Again, this is fresco secco, approximately 32 inches high. Now this fowling scene, while not from Akhenaten's revolution, demonstrates perhaps a clue that artists were ready for a revolution in the treatment of the human figure. There appear to be things that contradict one another in style in this particular work of art. The water and the figures are from the old style, while the animals were rendered based on visual perception. Now, Akhenaten was perhaps the most revolutionary of all the pharaohs. His time was probably the strangest and most interesting in all of Egyptian history. Akhenaten introduced the concept of monotheism to Egypt. He proclaimed the sun god Aten to be the single universal god to be worshipped, and he proclaimed that he himself was his son and prophet. Now, what effect do you think this had on the views of Egypt toward living man, even the pharaoh? That of less mystique and being less godlike. This is a sculpture of Akhenaten, also called Amenhotep the Fourth, dating from around 1348 to 1336 BC. This is limestone, and it's only 3 1/8 inches high. Now, the inevitable relaxation of the Egyptian canon resulted in a daring mix of naturalism and stylization that we see in this tiny portrait of Akhenaten. In a way, you could argue that this piece is somewhat abstract. In many ways, we could say Akhenaten gave birth to portraiture itself. This is Queen Nefertiti, dating from 1348 to 1336 or 35, limestone, 19 inches tall. Now, never before had man or woman been represented so naturally as seen in this beautiful head of Nefertiti. This is seen almost as nothing but a head. That's not a criticism, but perhaps a defining characteristic of portraiture itself. Nefertiti is thought to have been one of the most beautiful women in history, and in many opinions, backed up by hieroglyphic inscriptions, was thought to have been the driving force behind the monotheistic or one God movement. Now, the balance of the head and the crown with the elongation of the neck absolutely defines elegance in this sculpture, and this is a symbol that will be repeated in art throughout history. The Amarna style continued in the tomb of Tutankhamun, or King Tut. He was a lesser pharaoh, apparently dead at the age of 18, but he lives on magnificently, perhaps more so than any of the other pharaohs. The significant reason that Tut lives on in such brilliance is that his tomb was not plundered. This is the innermost coffin of Tutankhamun from the tomb at Thebes from the 18th dynasty, dating from around 1325 BC. This is gold with inlay of enamel and semi-precious stones, and is approximately 6 feet 1 inches long. The magnificent craftsmanship, color, and design are evident in this innermost coffin of Tut. About 1/4 ton of gold, 500 pounds of gold, was used here in this most inner of the 3 coffins. Here is the cover of the coffin of Tutankhamun, 1327 BC again, gold inlaid with enamel and semi-precious stones. The cover of the coffin in its entirety is 6 feet and 7/8 of an inch long. Beautiful design, very expressive face, very expressive character. You see the false beard that we referred to Nefertiti, or not Nefertiti, but Hatshepsut as wearing earlier. Now within the coffin is the death mask, and this is an interesting blend of the Amarna style with the fullness and individuality of the features with the grandeur of earlier styles, expressing the power of this boy king who would eventually be commemorated by Steve Martin. Now this is a crazy thought, but one that surely would have been appreciated by the Egyptians, because they fostered the idea that one lives on each time his name is spoken. Now repetition here provides visual unity and interest. This was a tool of the Egyptian artist, as evidenced by the parallel bands that surround the face. This is an overall view of Tutankhamun's painted chest that was found in his tomb, 1325 BC, wood, approximately 20 inches long. Now this painted chest of Tut's is a wonderful study in a number of ways. First off, it's a great combination of old and new styles. The king's figures on the left-hand side of the tomb are separated by horizontal bands, so there's order, there's stability, while the conquered enemy on the right is a chaotic mess. Secondly, the image of the king as a conqueror, in this case, is false, and this is merely a continuation of old definitions of the pharaoh. In many cases, representations of the pharaoh in ancient Egypt differ from the actual fact. And third, you can argue that this piece is very similar to the work of artists from Crete in the liveliness and naturalism of the figures. Perhaps those artists jumped at the chance to work for the pharaoh once restrictions were relaxed. This is Mentemhet from Karnak, the 25th dynasty, dating from around 650 BC. It's granite. It's about 4.5 feet tall. Akhenaten's ideas were wiped out by the succeeding pharaohs of a more conservative nature. Now, while Akhenaten's monuments were destroyed, the work that survived in his tomb provides one of the greatest chapters in the book on Egyptian art.